Amen. Amen. Thank you. So we are in the second week of our series called Filled, celebrating God's generosity as we reflect on our stewardship season here at Kingswood, but also think about our own relationships with money. I'm sure if each of us were asked today, what do you think about the church and money? Should the church talk about money? How much should the church talk about money? How often should the church ask for money? How often should the church be involved in the social needs of our country and our world and giving to things such as hurricane relief and natural disasters and meeting the needs of people in the community? We probably would all have different responses. If I asked you what your personal practices and beliefs are of money in your household or the household you grew up in, you'd all have different stories. I know for myself, growing up, I remember when I was 12, there was a knock at the door, and it was our pastor. He had never been to our house before, and so this was very, very bizarre. My parents quickly bolted up and answered the door and invited him in. When he came in, he said, I would love to have a conversation with the two of you, but perhaps you could dismiss your son, me. So I scurried off and stood close to the door by the basement and listened in intently. I could hear him. He was beginning to tell my family that our church was in a very difficult place financially, that he had not taken a check for the last 2 months so that he didn't have to let go any staff. They were very tight, and he kept hoping and waiting for something to change or something to shift, and it wasn't. In many ways, the church was unhealthy on many fronts, not just financially. That was just a sign of the deeper issues. And he told my family that the elders had got together and they'd made a list of members who they believed were not giving the 10% of their income, assuming that they knew or thought they knew what people were making. And he said, we've decided that if you don't give what we think is your 10% of your income, then we're going to be required to take your membership away. I didn't really understand it all when I was 12 listening through the door, but I remember my parents being very silent. I remember realizing they're not silent people. This is not a good thing. And so at that very moment, I could hear the pastor filling the space more, talking. I could hear how anxious, how nervous he was, how worried he was about the future of the church. But never once did he ask my family about where they were at financially. Never once did he ask them what it was like for them or why they gave or how much they gave or why they gave what they gave or what their journey with giving had been. He didn't ask about any of that. He just assumed. I wish he would, looking back, I wish that he would have asked my family how they were doing financially. I can remember on weekends when my stepbrothers would come over, we couldn't afford to feed everybody. So my family would only eat ramen noodles and Kool-Aid. I hated when my stepbrothers came over. It was hard. And it was a constant reminder that we didn't have a lot. We were rationed out food. I was always told, sorry, you cannot have this, that's for tomorrow. Never was able to extend food or hospitality to my friends who would come over and visit. It was hard. I remember when I would want to go to the movies and I would ask my mom, Mom, can I have $5? That was when it was $5 to go to a movie, to go to the movies. And she'd say, I'm really sorry, we just don't have it. I remember I'd have to save up as much as I could to be able to save for that moment when my friends would ask me to do something because it was always so embarrassing to tell them I don't have the money to go. I remember when I began to grow out of my clothes and we didn't have the money to buy me clothes that fit my body, and so my mom would have to humble herself and we would ask together to my grandma if she could take me school shopping. It was hard as our family, and the little bit that they did give was difficult, and it was the first time they had ever given to a church, and they were so proud that they could even give that little bit. How many of you know that there is a way to ask and to make a need known without doing it based in fear and guilt and shame and a sense of scarcity? But there is a way to make a need known within a church or within your own life or within a community by holding it up in such a way and challenging people to give and to step out and to be stretched, while at the same time knowing the very people you're asking that of, and knowing if it is stretching them, knowing what it is you're asking of them. My family stayed in the church. My stepdad said, they're not chasing us away. They'll just take our membership, that's fine. That lasted a little while, and then they got very bitter and hurt and angry, rightfully so, and they left. I stayed. I still gave my tithe of my $5 allowance a week. And I never really understood why my family left until I got older. And I realized the great pain that had caused them. And in our story today, there's a need that is presented in John chapter 2. A need that's presented in a very specific and a very certain way, and in a way that I think we can learn and glean from in our own church and in our own experiences. I think this church at Kingswood does a really good job at honoring people, and I've been really grateful to be a part of a congregation that knows how to handle money well, knows how to challenge people to give, but also knows how to honor and respect where people are at in their journeys. And so I'm really grateful for the ways in which you have modeled and taught to me what it looks like to be generous and wise, gentle, kind stewards of God's money and God's home. So I thank you for that, because that wasn't my experience growing up. And in John chapter 2, we find that Jesus and his mother Mary walk about 3.5 miles. Perhaps they went on some type of animal, and they arrive at this wedding in Cana. Some scholars believe that maybe they arrive somewhere about in the middle of the week. And they think that because by the time it seems that they get there, it seems that they're all out of wine. And typically, wedding celebrations lasted a whole week. So it wasn't just a day, it was a whole week. And I said in first service, boy, how exciting would it be for me to go to Pastor James and to be able to say, I need a whole week off for a wedding celebration. That would be so exciting to be able to take a week off for that. And at these wedding celebrations, people drank. And the best wine was always saved for first. And obviously because it was really, really powerful for the palate, and it was really, really sensitive to those tastes, it was quality. It probably had been fermenting for a long time. And then once everybody was drunk, the story tells us, that's when they brought out the Aldi wine. That's when they brought out the weak stuff. The stuff that no one even realized because they were so far gone that this stuff is awful. And so Mary comes to Jesus and she makes a need known. She says, Jesus, they're all out of wine. Jesus' response is a little bizarre. He says, dear woman, that is not our problem. This is not our wedding. We are not the ones who paid for this. This is not our responsibility. Why should we even care? We brought a wedding gift. That should be enough. So Mary makes the need known, and then Jesus says, it is not my time yet. I think it's an interesting line to think about. I'm sure that Mary at this point was getting a little frustrated. Here she had birthed a Christ child into the world, this miraculous child, the Son of God, and yet he's 30 and he still lives in her basement. I'm sure she's thinking, what is happening here? Why have you not done some miraculous sign or miracle or began your ministry? You haven't done anything incredible yet. You're just a carpenter, and scholars believe that at this point his father Joseph probably would have passed away, and so in many ways he was taking care of his mother, but I'm sure she was getting frustrated thinking, when is something big going to happen here? Do something with this power of yours. And so she turns to him and she says, there is no wine. Hint, hint, would you do something already? This isn't a big deal. I don't even know if she thought that he was going to do something. I don't even know if she thought he could turn the water into wine, if that was in her mind. Perhaps she was just saying, here is a problem. Here is a need. Making it known to Jesus. And then she turns and she says to the servants that are around, do whatever he says. So she turns and she throws her hair back and she walks away. She leaves it in Jesus' lap and she says, do what you wish with it. You know the need, you know the problem. It's your decision if you're going to fulfill it and fill it or not. So she walks away, and then Jesus, without missing a beat, says to the servants, there's these large jars of ceremonial bath water. They weren't filled yet, and these jars often, they could fill 20 to 30 gallons, and there were 6 of them. That's pretty substantial. And so Jesus tells the servants, fill these suckers up, and then go take a cup and dip into that jar. And then I want you to take that cup of water, and I want you to deliver it to the master of the ceremonies and tell him to take a sip of this. And so they do just that. And the master of the ceremonies puts this cup of water up to his mouth, and as he takes it into his mouth, all of a sudden it is turning into wine. And he thinks, wow, this is the good stuff. Where were they hiding this? Is this a late delivery? This is really good. Why did they save this for last? The whole wedding party and everybody else is gone already. They're not going to be able to enjoy this. So he calls over the bride and the groom and he says, listen, why did you save the best wine for last? I think it's just fascinating to think about. Why did Jesus tell the servants to take it to the bridegroom? Why not? I mean, to the wedding coordinator, master of the ceremonies, and not to the bridegroom. I mean, they're the ones who paid for it and put it on. Well, if you think about it, everybody probably would have been pretty gone. They finished all of the wine. They would have been a pretty loaded group. But you know the one person who definitely wouldn't have been loaded? The wedding coordinator. Valerie, tell me right now, could you come to a wedding being loaded? You could not. You could not happen. Valerie Copenhaver is our wedding coordinator, and there is no way she could come to a wedding ceremony loaded or even a little tipsy. She's got to be at the top of her game because it is her job to coordinate it all, keep it together, keep the details going, keep everybody happy. That's her job. And so who does Jesus tell them to take it to? The person who is going to be able to enjoy this wine. And when that wedding coordinator tastes it, amazed. Now, the whole moral of the story right here is in this one line that I think is just fabulous. In this one line, Jesus, the story tells us that it was this miraculous sign of turning the water into wine at Cana in Galilee that was the first time Jesus had revealed his glory and moved out of his mother's basement. And his disciples believed in him. Notice it doesn't say it was the first miraculous miracle. It says it was the first miraculous sign. And because of this sign, his disciples realize this guy is a real deal. This guy is the Messiah. This guy is someone special. This guy is someone worth following. I believe that this first sign was a very, very clear sign to his disciples that this is what Jesus' ministry was going to be like. From this point on, when they saw a need, when someone made a need known, it was their job to meet it. Jesus does this over and over again throughout his ministry. When he encounters the sick and they make their needs known, he heals them. When he encounters parents who have sick or demon-possessed children, he meets their needs. When people are hungry, he multiplies loaves and fishes. Jesus, time and time again, sees a need, and when someone speaks out that they have a need, Jesus meets it. I wish that my pastor growing up, that he knew how to make a need known. And he knew how to call people to meet it without guilt and shame and fear and condemnation and a deep level of scarcity. If only he had been able to meet needs and call people to needs like Mary and Jesus. I was thinking just this week as I was watching a documentary. This documentary walked through this couple that had decided they were going to adopt. And they decided where they were going to adopt was in Haiti because of the natural disasters that hit there. They thought there would certainly be a dramatic need there. And so they walked through this process of being able to adopt these two children who were siblings. And when they went to be able to finally go over to Haiti and get their children, those who were running the orphanage turned to them and said, "Now, would you like to meet these children's mother?" What? They're orphans. I mean, you're telling me they have a mother? What do you mean? She said, well, 80% of the people, of the children inside of this orphanage, their parents just live right in town. The family, perplexed, sort of not understanding. They said, well, what do you mean? Why are they in the orphanage if their family's right in town? I said, well, there's so much poverty here, there's no jobs. They don't have work, so that if they don't have work, they can't provide food for their children and clothing. Some of them have basic housing, but it's often just sort of put together shambles. They can't purchase property. They don't have money for it because they don't have a job. So these parents sort of standing there perplexed by this issue, they said, so the only thing that keeps 80% of these children from being with their parents is a job? And so they decided, as entrepreneurs here in the United States, that they were going to start a business there in that town in Haiti. They were going to teach people how to make jewelry. And they were going to teach them how to make clothing. And they were going to teach them how to make these beautiful necklaces, which ended up being the number one thing that they sold. This business quickly grew. And they even sell these necklaces at Walmart now. They ended up employing 150 parents within that community. And they ended up providing homes for almost all the children in that orphanage. And they said that from there they were able to feed 750 people of children and families who lived with those people who they provided work for. They saw a need, and they met it. They saw a need, and they realized, if this is the only thing that's keeping them from that, let's turn this water into wine. Let's turn this situation around. For Harvest Fest, out in the foyer, in the fireside room, they were selling jewelry from Guatemala, and they were telling folks that folks in Guatemala are the ones who made it. And in many ways, when you purchase that, it supports them. And it allows them to have a life and to have their needs met. It's like turning water into wine. And so as we consider this stewardship season at Kingswood, I want to challenge you to be people who consider, what are the needs of Kingswood? What are the needs that Kingswood are meeting? How can I partner with those needs? What is it that I can do? Perhaps for some of you, you can do more and extreme amounts, and perhaps others of you may say, I'll do a little bit, and others of you may say, hey, I lost my job. I don't even have work, but I can give more time now. And perhaps others of you will be sensitive to the whispers of the Spirit who's prompting you, just like Mary coming to Jesus and saying, here's a need. And may our hearts and may our eyes and our minds and our hearts be open to not respond out of fear or guilt or shame or scarcity, but to respond out of faith, believing that when there is a need, Jesus meets it. And most often, Jesus meets that need through us. Amen? And amen. As you go into the world, may you see the needs of people around you. May you be sensitive to the whispers and the Mary who come tugging at your robe and make it known to you. And may you, when you hear it, may you respond as a sign of God's love and extravagant generosity. May you turn that water into wine.
Amen.